Hello and welcome to Talking Live. I'm Dr. Robi Ludwig, and I am so thrilled to have Montel Williams. He is a legendary talk show host as well as many other things. I mean, he has created documentaries. He's a fabulous actor. He's an advocate. He's a talk show host right now for Military Makeover with Montel on Lifetime. And I'm just so thrilled to have you back, Montel, and to be with you again. The last time we saw each other was at your premiere.
Absolutely, quite a long time ago. But I tell you, it's been a heck of a journey, especially the last 3 months. Come on now. I mean, I know we have so much we could talk. I wish I was doing a daytime talk show right now, so I could have you on and we can have some discussions about what's going on psychologically to this nation. I mean,
you know what? Maybe we could create it because I would love to work with you again. I don't know if you know this, Montel, but it's really thanks to you that I have the TV career that I have today. Your producers found me the first time I was ever on television. God bless them, because I don't think I was very good back then.
No, you did a great job.
And I actually have video of the first time I was ever on your show, which is 25 years ago.
Wow. Wow, that dates us, but neither one of us has changed, so God bless.
God bless us. You were the first person also to ever pay me for my appearances, and I actually have a framed check that you gave me in my office. So You've been a mentor, you're extremely talented, and your background is so interesting, given that you were in the military, in the U.S. Navy.
I was in the Navy and the Marine Corps.
The Marine Corps.
Started off enlisted in the Marine Corps, then was selected to go to the Naval Academy Prep School, then to the Naval Academy, got my degree and commission in the United States Navy. And it's very unusual, but I did a lateral transfer from the Marine Corps to the Navy.
You majored in, I never knew this about you, you majored in general engineering.
Yeah, I majored in general engineering, but I also had a minor in international security affairs. When at the academy, my language was that I chose was Chinese. So I graduated with a State Department proficiency in Chinese. But then, the way the U.S. military works, of course, just because you show and demonstrate any kind of propensity for language, I was sent off to the DLI, the Defense Language Institute, where I got a degree in Russian and became a Russian linguist. And when I got my commission, unbeknownst to me and unbeknownst to the military, right before I graduated from the Naval Academy in 1980, I suffered my first bout of MS, but no one could figure it out because I was a 23-year-old, African-American male. And if you look at, back in 1980, if you look at all of the, documentation about MS back then, MS was considered a disease that afflicted only Caucasian women of Northern European descent. So it was very hard for them. No one even understood it. I went to everywhere from Walter Reed, Bethesda, Johns Hopkins, the Mayo Clinic. I was seen at the Wells Eye Clinic in Pennsylvania and misdiagnosed every single time for having MS. So that's part of the reason why when I was finally commissioned as a naval officer, I was commissioned in the Navy and not the Marine Corps, because I entered the academy in the Marine Corps. My intention was to become a Marine Corps pilot, but my first episode of MS afflicted me the same way it afflicts a lot of people when they first have symptoms. I went almost half blind in my left eye, but no one knew why. And my vision never came back completely. I have a really large scotoma in my left eye. I've got some weird things that are called afferent pupillary defects and some other weird, bizarre things that are going in my left eye that didn't allow me to be commissioned in the Marine Corps, because the Marine Corps requires that you have correctable vision to 20/20. Mine was not correctable. So I was given an opportunity to go ahead. And I mean, I had to fight through the Senate. Back then I used I was from the state of Maryland. So I used my Senate and the congressional, representatives to fight to give me a commission, because I figured, I was in I had been at that point in time in the service for 6 years, and now you're going to tell me you're going to put me out? That ain't happening. So I got commissioned as a special duty intelligence officer in the Navy, cryptologic specialty, and they sent me off to become a Russian linguist, and then I served, which is really crazy. I got what's called a NPQ. a not physically qualified commission, which meant that I was not supposed to be, out at sea and things. Shoot, come on. My job, especially as a cryptological direct support officer, I ended up spending more time at sea than most of my contemporaries and peers. I have well over 300 days under the water. I have over 300 days on top of the water. I was in the Persian Gulf. I was in the Indian Ocean. I was out there in the Persian Gulf for our first Libyan shoot down. And as a matter of fact, our team received some, acknowledgement and awards for the fact that, it was my cryptological team that actually helped to put, weapons on target when Muammar Gaddafi was taken out. So,
oh my goodness,
yeah,
what
a long time ago.
What did they think you had back then?
No one really could figure it out. And, let's remember, this is 1980. And,
right.
Though we've made some incredible strides in the last, 60 years, close 40 years, it was really, no one could really figure it out. My MRIs weren't as proficient as they are today. Back then, we were talking about a machine that was only like 1.5, 1.7 Tesla. And now we have, machines that are 7 Tesla. So, these are machines that are really, really, really fine-tuned. Back then, you had to use contrast. Right now, you don't have to use contrast. So no one could really determine it. Now, I had one doctor at, even this is in 1980, one doctor at the Wells Eye Clinic, which had one of the most powerful MRIs in America at the time, who looked at my MRI and said, this is really weird. Did anybody in your family ever have anything called MS? And I said, no. He said, nah, it can't be. And I mean, if you saw pictures of me when I graduated from the academy, or pictures of me, and up until maybe 10 years ago when I started slow down a little bit with the exercising, I was a, competitive weightlifter, and I was a competitive, at that time, competitive power lifter. So I was walking around, with at 210 pounds with a, 28-inch waist. And, I was able to run a mile in a little bit over, 6 minutes. I was, doing 20 push-ups, 20 pull-ups, 100, push-ups, 100 sit-ups. So no one could really understand it. I just had this weird thing going on in my eye and a weird patch of pain in my side. And nobody said, well, it's just something afferent. Don't worry about it.
I was part of your show in the 90s, 1996, and it was around that time that you came out with your diagnosis of MS. What made you decide to go public? Because, many people decide to keep their medical history private, even if they are public figures.
Well, what was really weird about it, now I was technically officially diagnosed in 2000. I was, had a preliminary diagnosis in 1999. And when my diagnosis came out, to tell you the honest truth, the only reason why I did it was because back then there were some tabloids sniffing around, and someone who had been involved in my diagnosis had reached out to one of the tabloids and given them information. So I wanted to beat them to the punch. I want to be the person who's responsible for and owning the definition of who I am rather than let other people own that definition. So I held a press conference and came out and beat the tabloids to the story.
That's the downside of fame.
Yeah. And
it's hard to trust certain people, and that shouldn't be. You talk about on it was Good Morning America.
Sure.
How Dr. Oz, watching that show, saved your life. I found that interview so fascinating, where again, you were really at the forefront of sharing what happened to you. You experienced a stroke.
Yeah, it was crazy. About 2 years ago now. And I literally, and I got to tell you, me, I am, I consider myself to be in the best health I was in 2 years ago. I literally was still working out every day. I don't work out as much now. As a matter of fact, this last week has been a chore, but I was working out every day. I was literally doing extreme workouts, not some of the stuff that you see on television, but I was doing workouts where I was still using a lot of heavy weight. I was still doing, what's called giant sets, where I was doing 30 repetitions with weight in a row and 3 different exercises. I was doing, 40 minutes of aerobics every day, and I was banging. And I just had a physical, and my physical came back. My blood work was perfect. I've never had high blood pressure. My cholesterol was right around 180. It wasn't really a high. And I thought I was in the best shape of my life. I happened to be in a gym in Manhattan as getting ready to be a keynote speaker at a conference the next morning, and got up at 9 in the morning, and I went down. I was working out, And it just so happened that, of course, it was a hotel gym and it's in Manhattan. So it was empty. I was the only person in there. And, I'd done 40 minutes of aerobics at that point in time. And I was in the process of doing some pretty heavy weight resistance training. And I heard this really loud noise, like a pop. And I looked to the left of me and I looked to the right of me and I realized there's nobody else there. And I was doing dumbbell squats. So I threw the dumbbell on the ground and I realized I started getting dizzy. And I realized the pop came from the back side of my head. And, and I immediately, I had a little trouble with my jaw. And I immediately remembered Dr. Oz's show. And I said, you just had a blanking stroke. And I went, no, I couldn't have had a stroke. And I started getting even dizzier. And I went, I just had a stroke. And I looked up at the walls and the walls started kaleidoscoping, everything started moving around. And my first inclination was to lay down, but then something flashed in my head. And Mehmet and I are very good friends. We've been very good friends. I've done 20 appearances on the show. And we used to talk all the time. And it flashed in my head. He had done a show about a month earlier on stroke and had given out some of the warning signs. And I went, you know what? I'm having a stroke. So I immediately just had to wall walk myself. And what I mean by wall walking, putting my hands on the wall, using that for balance to get from the gym. I had to walk about 60 yards to get to an elevator. I took the elevator up to the 13th floor or 14th floor where I and my wife were at. And I put the key in the door and walked in. I said, baby, you need to call an ambulance right now. I think I just had a stroke. Call them and tell them your husband had a stroke. Now, what was so amazing about that, Robbie, is that when she made the phone call, at this time, Manhattan was one of the only, New York was one of the only states in the country that had 3 specially configured emergency vehicles for stroke that were donated the year before by a person who suffered a stroke, and there was no stroke capability in the ambulance. Now, what was crazy is, just so happened is that morning, one of those vehicles, which is in Manhattan and moves around every day to a different location and sits overnight just waiting, one of them happened to be 3 blocks from my hotel.
God was looking over you. Don't you think, Montel? It's miraculous.
Had to be. Well, that vehicle showed up. I remember this distinctly. And I literally sat down on the couch and leaned back. And the EMT walked in the room and he said, your wife called and said, you think you had a stroke? I said, yeah, I know I had a stroke. And he went, yeah, right. Well, let's get you downstairs. We have a special vehicle. I went downstairs. They performed a CAT scan on me in the street in front of my hotel. Now,
that's unbelievable.
Unbelievable. You mentioned, here's something even funnier. You mentioned Dr. Oz. My publicist happened to be there with me at the time. And I said, call Dr. Oz, call him. Mehmet was in Europe at the time. And he picked up the phone in Europe while I was in that emergency vehicle. And the doctor comes on and appears on a television screen up in the corner and says, Mr. Williams, I think you're right. You did have a stroke and you're still having a stroke right now. We need to get you into this hospital. And I said, well, look, I got Dr. Oz on the phone. You got to talk to him. And I handed the phone over to the EMT. And Mehmet and the doctor were conferring as they were rushing me to the emergency room. I ended up at New York Presbyterian. And I got to tell you, it was from about 20 minutes after the stroke for the next 5 days, I literally was almost gone. The type of stroke that I had was a class 4 bleed. And, it didn't hit my brainstem, but it came kind of close. It came within centimeters of my brainstem. And if it had hit my brainstem, I probably would have died. And the first 5 days, I got to tell you the truth, I don't remember anything. All I remember was waking up to my wife telling me she loved me and going to sleep to my wife telling me she loved me. And after the 5th day, I started to recover. I've been working on a lot of different things. I had a medical device that actually has now proven its efficaciousness for stroke. I started applying that device myself in the hospital at New York Presbyterian. And within 20 days, I was literally back. I went to rehab on day 7. And within 2 weeks, I was really bouncing back 10 times faster than other people who had come in on the same day with almost a similar stroke. And the stroke that I had was not an ischemic stroke. I had a hemorrhagic stroke. So had they not figured that out in that emergency vehicle, they could have probably killed me by giving me the wrong medication in that vehicle.
do you have any better sense what caused the stroke? Because you are in such fantastic shape.
It's really bizarre when I will tell you this, Robbie, even now today, most doctors are calling this a transient event, which means, I don't know. Really,
Yeah.
honestly.
We don't know yet.
We don't know yet. They have no idea why this really happened. My blood pressure wasn't up. Now, I will tell you that during the stroke itself, my blood pressure spiked through the roof. I had a day before that taken a different medication than I had been ever taken before.
Oh.
And that may have had something to do with it, but that medication has never proved to cause blood pressure spikes in anyone else. So there's really no rhyme or reason. It just happened, and if you remember, almost at the exact same time, Luke Perry had a stroke that he succumbed to. Within 30 days of mine, Kevin Singleton had a stroke that he succumbed to. There were multiple, and if you look at the medical information at the time, this was 2 years ago, and still going on today, hemorrhagic stroke has been on the rise in America, and especially with younger people, way younger than me, and no one knows why.
Do you think it's environmental, or we just don't know enough yet?
I think we don't know enough yet. I would hate to put out, some really bad information, but I know for me, and I've had now post-stroke, seen multiple doctors. I've had my blood evaluated. I've gone through some pretty extensive testing, and I was running a little bit dehydrated throughout my life during that period of time. Dehydration is one of those things that can cause a stroke. So it may have been because of that. So I'm really been on the bandwagon, number one, to make sure that we all know. And I'm on some medication now that, I've never been on this kind of medication throughout my entire life, but I'm on medication now. And I try my best to remember to stay as hydrated as I possibly can. My wife comes and yells at me, every day, did you drink your water today? Did you drink your water today?
You're married to a good woman. That's why men who are happily married live longer.
Absolutely.
That's right. Well, you've done some really interesting things. Right now, you're part of a show called Military Makeover, which premieres on Lifetime. And this is where you bring your history with you to television. You help out people who need a helping hand, who have given their service to us. How did you find this project, or how did this project find you?
Well, I'm going to tell you is that the project had been in existence for about 2 years before I got involved. And for those who remember, the Gunny, who is the guy that was in a lot of movies, always played a gunnery sergeant. His name was Gunny Early. Gunny Early was the host of the show, and it was called Military Makeover then. And unfortunately, the Gunny recognized and realized he had congenital heart failure and knew he was passing away. And they had asked him, well, who would you like to have take over the show, if things go awry? And he said, well, you guys ought to reach out to that Montel Williams guy. Now, I'll tell you how things are. This is just how God's looking out. But the day I had my stroke, 2 days before that, the team from Military Makeover reached out to ask my manager if I would consider being a part of the show. I had my stroke. On day 9 after my stroke, I signed a contract for that show because I realized that I said, I'm not going out like this. I'm coming back from this, and I was going to come back from this 100%. And I signed a contract for the show, and they went ahead and honored it and moved forward. And I became the host of, now it's called Military Makeover with Montel. And, it's a show that you described it correctly. We reach out to, or we have, troops who are, veterans who are very deserving, who are nominated to the show. We go through a nomination process, and we select a family, and then we go in that family, in that home, and we make their home over from the ground up. I'm telling you, everything from floors to walls to kitchens to bathrooms to, we make them smart homes. We do roofing, we do tile, we fix the outside. And all of this is done because we've got some unbelievable sponsor partners in every community we go into.
I was very impressed to see all the people donating their time. And the last episode I watched, the person you're helping clearly had post-traumatic stress, and you had such a powerful conversation, which brought you to tears. And just one of the many things I love about you is you're so open and out there with your emotions. Clearly you're a macho guy, and yet you reveal your emotions, and it's so freeing.
Well, thank you. Well, I got to tell you, now I know part of my emotional outbursts sometimes, especially in front of the camera, are because of one of these very, very small symptoms that I have from MS, which is now being called pseudobulbar effect, but was always
Mm.
called emotional lability. I have suffered from emotional lability because I have scarring in my brain, in the pons area of my brain, that controls my highs and lows.
Mm.
I've worked very diligently and hard at trying to contain that. But you know what? I also recognize that there's no shame in my game. I could care less what people think about me because I express emotions. That's what sets us apart from any other animal on the planet, is the fact that.
Maybe that's your superpower, Montel.
There you go. I
I
also
think
like to call
so.
my superpower the fact that I alone will own the definition of who I am. I'm
That's
going to
right.
define me. I'm not going to let anybody else define me. So, this experience that I've had now with Military Makeover has been just incredible. I mean, right now, our new family that will start airing on the 23rd of August, and we air every Friday morning at 7:30 Eastern on Lifetime, and we're doing the Marquez family, and the Marquez family is really unique family. This gentleman is a retired sergeant major, and he spent his time in the service in 3 different jobs. He's been a gunner, he's been a combat guy working in close in air direct support, and then he spent the last years of his career in the morgue,
Oh,
working with our fallen soldiers. And you want to talk about one of those thankless jobs that
yeah.
no one understands. When our fallen come back to Dover, Delaware,
Mm.
they normally come back, and it's sad to say, and I hate to say it this way, but they come back in pieces. And you've got people that are trained on how to work as hard as they can to put those bodies back together again so that a family can have an open casket funeral. And, these are people who, now he worked in the mortuary affairs in the combat zone in places like Afghanistan and Iraq. And, he had to go out and recover the bodies in the field. And sometimes he would show up and, there may be, children who have been mortally wounded and killed
Mm.
that, our military, what a lot of people don't know, we will gather all those bodies
Mm.
and take them back and work on them and prepare them and get them ready for, a sacred turnover to the family. And a lot of these guys, here's this gentleman who, we're doing, I mean, literally, he had 2 small children at home.
Mm.
And, every time he would recover a family, he would recover a body, he would think about his own kids. So he
I
is
mean, how
trying
can
to.
you not be traumatized by that? I was so happy. I watched a clip, and we'll have a link up so people can find it, that he went to therapy and he
Yes.
saw the power of talking through his experience and how helpful
Yep.
that could be.
Yep. And I've got to tell you, that's something that, we have done as a nation so poorly in this regard when it comes to mental
Hmm.
health. I mean,
Yeah.
when we bring up mental health, we don't even know what we're talking about.
Hmm.
And it's about time that we stop and take the blinders off and start addressing it directly.
One
I've
of
been.
the things you wanted to talk about is Kyle Rittenhouse, who
Oh.
recently was arrested for first-degree murder, to kind of psychologically get into and unpack, what is going on with all this violence. It's really disturbing. And I've lived in New York a really long time, and
Mhm,
I'm not an easily frightened person. I'm just not. But I have
mhm.
to tell you, I'm out in the streets now, and I don't feel as comfortable as I once did.
Let me tell you something, Bobby. I hate to try, and I'm not politicizing anything, but
Yeah,
our political climate
yeah.
has set the stage right now where we have desperate factions of this society that are pitted against each other in ways that we've never, well, no, in ways that we've always been pitted against each other, and we kept it under the surface because people have exercised some personal constraint. But now
Hmm.
they're not. Now, I'm so
Yeah.
sorry. I've been watching the news this morning and have been so angered by, the reaction to this garbage that took place last night. Because first off, this is a 17-year-old boy.
Right.
Let's get this straight. And I don't care what state you live in. And I believe in, the Second Amendment more than probably most people in the world do.
Mm-hmm.
But the Second Amendment wasn't meant for a 17-year-old boy to carry a weapon down the street.
And it
then
was legal for him to have in the state. It's not legal. I believe he was violating.
I am pretty positive because he wasn't 18, he was violating the law.
That's right.
Number two, if you look at the videos from 2 nights ago, or was it, I guess it was last night,
Mm-hmm.
look at the videos. The video shows that the police drove past him, offered him water, and thanked him for being there. So where's the complicity in the police that decided that though they may not have known he was 17, how dare you look at that kid and he's not old enough to have that weapon.
I've been talking about murder for a very long time.
Right.
And when I look at the landscape of who should we look at in terms of being dangerous, it's young boys. And also when they have access to guns that they should not have access to. Because very often they're too young to have a mental health diagnosis in some cases, or a history of violence or hospitalization, but they're right on the cusp. And that's what we should be looking for, because those are the people that are dangerous. Time bombs.
Look at his website. Look at his internet interactions. And you see, this is a person who really loved guns and has had images up there of him taking apart guns, putting them back together again, supposedly being a big supporter of the police, but only because they were championing his use of guns. I tell you something. You say you're scared right now. I am literally, frightened beyond belief. I don't want to go outside and be shot from afar because someone just doesn't like the color of my skin. And we're living at a time right now where, in the next 3 months, when election day rolls around, we've had a president that has basically intimated that, those who are his supporters should go ahead and get their guns and get enough ammunition, and this young man was a young man who was a supporter of a group that believes in supporting the next Revolutionary War. America is getting ready to face its biggest demons it's ever faced in about 3 months. And I don't know. I'll tell you, Robbie, I mean, I just wonder, where are we as a nation psychologically? I mean, do we really hate each other so much that we want to go back to a time of slavery? Do we really have a group of people in this country who want to own other people, who want to rape other people, who want to beat?
Absolutely not. I mean, listen, I'm sitting in New York City where people are socially progressive and hopefully intellectually progressive. But one of the downsides I see is that we need to be able to have conversations with people that we disagree with. It's very easy to talk in an echo chamber where you can find your audience of people who will tell you you are right no matter what you're saying. That's very dangerous. If we're not in a group that is discussing diverse ideas, then we are just not going to progress forward at all as a country or as individuals.
Right. I've been saying this for years now, that we are at the precipice of the end of democracy. The United States goes away, the rest of the democracies around the world will go away.
That's right. That's right. We're the last hope, really.
We've been the beacon that has literally defined democracy for the last 300 years. And, we have to note and be very clear that we haven't even lasted as long as the Roman Empire. So, if we don't put the effort into turning this around, I think, what's that old, you let the dogs out the fence. They're already gone. They're running down the street, barking really loud. And you look at some of the videos from last night and of this kid, I can't believe that this morning there were certain representatives of law enforcement stating that they were supporting his efforts. They supported the fact that they were out there trying to contain violence after curfew. Well, excuse me, he shouldn't have been out after curfew.
Well, yes, and he shouldn't have had a gun because it's not legal. And I was reading about his background, which is certainly a lot of red flags. He was a high school dropout. He was being bullied by somebody in the community for being dumb and stupid. I don't know whether his father was in his life or not. He was raised by a single mother, no shame there, but we don't know what his father is or whether he was a part of his life. And I think the police became the collective father figure, but we look at somebody who he lost his job as a lifeguard. So I'm sure that was a narcissistic wound. And so he gave himself this other fantasy job, grandiose, delusional. I'm sure there's a mental illness there. And we're not doing these boys, these teens, any favor by encouraging this grandiosity that's going to land them in prison when they really need mental health treatment.
And, he was one of possibly more 17-year-olds out there last night, on the streets, thinking that there was their job and responsibility to, protect property. And remember, he didn't even live in the state. Right. He had to cross state lines. And what's really even crazy is that he was interviewed twice by different news outlets before he did the shooting, interviewed again after the shooting, allowed to get in his truck and drive home. They arrested him in his home. They didn't even arrest him there. As a matter of fact, after the shooting, police, you see it in the video, drove past him and allowed him to keep walking away.
There's also a problem too where, people that should be arrested are not. And there's a problem there as well. So right. I really don't know what the answer is, but if you want me to join you in your efforts to reduce this problem, you just let me know.
Absolutely. We got to talk about it more. I think I'd love to have you come on my podcast so we can share some of your thoughts.
Anytime.
With my
Anytime.
Audience. Absolutely.
We do something called the Quick 5.
Sure.
And I might do the Quick 6 with you because I realized I never found out how you got into television given your background.
Right. Oh, real quick, let's see if I can do it fast. I literally had started a program while on active duty in the military back in 1988, where I was speaking in schools during my leave time from the service. I would take leave. I was going around the country. And back then, if you remember, in 88, I think Nancy Reagan had just said, just say no. We had a really an epidemic of drugs in the inner cities across the country, which a lot of people don't want to admit to, but we now know by fact was a planned, dispersal of drugs into the inner city areas because of Ollie North and all these guys trying to, raise money for Contras. They deliberately addicted a community in our country to make money. So I was speaking in schools around the country, talking about negative youth trends from dropping out, drugging out, and sexing out. And it became a media event because I was doing it in my uniform on my leave time, but I would show up at a school and speak, and NBC Nightly News ended up following. And before they did that, I was speaking all over the country. I had governors of states bringing me in, I had mayors of cities bringing me in, and I would take leave, go out, speak, go back to do my job as a special intelligence officer. I did a show in Denver where they asked me to host a forum among young people called the Fourth R, Kids Rap About Racism, that I ended up winning an Emmy for before I came off active duty. And I'll tell you a very, very interesting story. I reached out to, because I won that Emmy, I started reaching out to people in Hollywood to see if, anybody wanted to see if I could get a job. And at the exact same time that happened, the motion picture Glory was released. And if you remember the motion picture Glory, Glory ended up being distributed by Columbia TriStar to every school across the country as part of the national high school curriculum. They asked me to do a lead to that. And if you just Google Montel and Glory, intros Glory, you'll see me in a videotape where I introduce the motion picture Glory to high school students. The executive producer of the movie Glory, whose name was Freddie Fields, who's passed away, God bless his soul. Freddie saw me on the front of his movie, called my office and said, "Hey, pal, what are you doing on my movie? I don't know you." And I said, "Well, let me come out and talk to you." I flew out to Los Angeles on the 23rd of December, 1990, and had a conversation with Freddie Fields that day. By January 27th of 1991, Freddie Fields said to me, "I think you ought to be a talk show host." We took meetings with 7 of the top syndicators in the country. By April 1st, I signed a contract with Viacom to host my own show. May 8th, I flew to I flew to LA on like May 4th. May 8th, I shot my first show in just a test, and the show got picked up
Oh,
immediately, and I went on the air. And if you remember, this is weird. This is 1988, or sorry, 1991. My show went on the air in May of 1991.
mm,
Most news shows don't start until September. And so I went on the air and was immediately kind of compared to the existing four shows, which is Oprah, Sally, Geraldo, and Donahue.
mm-hmm.
Oprah, Sally, Geraldo, yeah, and Donahue. Even Regis and Regis and Kathy weren't considered a daytime talk show.
Oh, they
It
were
was
more.
they were no, so they were morning entertainment. So when I got compared to them, when the plethora of new shows began, I was considered the old guard. So I'm
Mm,
going to take you on a trip down memory lane. If you remember, in September of 1991, Ronald Reagan Jr. had a show.
I
John Tesh and Lisa
remember that.
Gibbons had a show. Uh, I think Jane Whitney had a show, and no, Jane Pratt had a show, and Chuck Woolery had a show. All of those shows got canceled. And if you look at the newspaper print in September of that year, they were comparing them to my show and Oprah. I was like the old guard.
Oh
So I
my
kind of got
goodness.
a pass. And now for the next, since the time my show started, over 127 other shows came and went, and we were still there. And I survived the plethora of the 90s talk.
Well, what people don't know, just to sidetrack a little bit, when I would come into your show, obviously in between commercials, you would talk and just about whatever, something that wasn't related to the show. And I remember thinking, like, you can talk about tying shoelaces and it would be so fascinating. I'm so glad you talk about things that are more important than that,
Right.
but you're incredibly charismatic and it's just really natural. I've always admired it and just aspire to be even like a quarter like
Oh
you in
no,
that
thank you.
regard, really and truly. Okay, I'm going to do the quick five now.
Okay.
As a child, what did you wish to become when you grew up?
I always wanted to be, as a young child, I wanted to be a pilot or an astronaut. When I got
Uh-huh.
older, in my yearbook, my high school yearbook, my class voted me most likely to be president of the United States in
Oh,
1994. Uh,
is there something we should know about?
no, because I've decided to pass on that 100%.
Okay. All right, just checking. What makes you roll your eyes every time you hear it?
I roll my eyes every time I hear someone say that America doesn't have issues.
Mm,
If you listen to, one side of the conversation right now, we act as if, we're living in a place that doesn't want to talk about its problems. And we
mm,
can't get beyond problems unless we solve them and talk about them.
absolutely. Not looking at problems, denial does not make anything go
Correct.
away. If anything, it makes it worse. What's your secret talent?
I like to say, you make comment about, I think my secret talent is this moniker I've had my whole life, is that I alone will own the definition of who I am. No one is going to ever define me but me. I'm a kid who was born in one of the biggest ghettos in America. And if I listen to the rhetoric of the day, I should have been dead or in jail right now. But I'm not dead or in
Mm-hmm.
jail because I've decided to pay attention to what I wanted to do and stay focused, learn, study, and figure out how to do it.
And we're so glad you did. What's the best piece of advice that you've ever received?
I wrote about this in one of my books. This is maybe 15 years ago. No, maybe even 20 years ago. Someone had told me that, every night before you go to bed, you should take a piece of paper and write on that piece of paper three things that you've done that you think are worth talking with you. I say it to myself before I go to sleep. What did I do today that's worth talking about tomorrow?
Hmm.
Write it down on a piece of paper so that when I wake up the next morning, I could read those three things and start my day with success. Now, I don't have to write it down on paper anymore. I just think about it. So I think about the three things that I did today that are worth talking about tomorrow and then start my day with success.
I love that. I'm going to use that for myself. And the last question is, what accomplishment are you most proud of? This is going to be hard because you've done so many things to be proud of.
It's tough. I think, having my 4 children, come on, the most incredible things in my life.
Yeah.
Marrying the woman I'm married to right now, most incredible thing in my life. The day I walked across the stage of the Naval Academy and threw my hat in the air, one of the most important days of my life. Recently, I was involved in two documentaries, one called Architects of Denial and the other one called Hate Among Us. Architects of Denial was about the Armenian genocide, which was the first genocide, one of the first major genocides of the last century. And Hitler himself said before he decided to implement his final theory, he said, who cares about or who remembers the Armenians? So that movie was presented, and I think it convinced our Senate and our Congress to pass a bill supporting the fact that and acknowledging the fact that genocide had taken place. But then the second documentary that I did was with a partner. It was called Hate Among Us, where we talk about the rise in anti-Semitism, and we put this out a year ago, and that just won an Emmy for Best Director. And
I haven't seen that. I would really like to see that.
you take a look at it. Architectsofdenial.com. I think it's still there, but if not, let me.
I saw that at your premiere and I loved it.
Yes.
But your more recent one I have not seen on anti-Semitism. So
yeah, that's that one. So that take a look at that, and I think you enjoy it. So I think that's one of the highlights of my life.
Well, you are a personal treasure, a national treasure. Keep doing your thing. You're amazing. Thank you, Montel. I'm really honored to have this opportunity to speak with you.
And thanks so much, Robbie, for being here. And keep helping to heal America, my girl. Come on.
I'm trying. I believe in us, and I think we can be better than we are today.
I agree. You have a great day.
Bye.
They will.